All right, welcome to the Rotary Club of El Paso's weekly meeting. It's going to be a fun meeting, lots of announcements, lots of stuff going on, lots of bow ties. I like that. So very exciting. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to point it to Catherine to lead us off with invocation, pledge, and four-way test.
I so need Dr. P on the call for this. He's not on? He's still not on? I actually included him in my invocation. Okay.
A little bit, like we could start off with
Ready? No. We can do it. We'll just do it again at the end.
Right. Let's do. Anybody have any announcements to share with us? Any good things going on?
Sunny's doing okay, which is better than doing bad. That's a great announcement.
That is a very good announcement, and I like how Sunny, they were recuperating everything, they were logging in and everything. So Sunny, it's always good to see you.
You guys are so nice to me. Thank you.
We kind of love you. I reread your beautiful article on Frank in the Rotarian magazine. Just, I can't bring myself to throw it away. It's one of those, you know. I met him actually, and I don't know if Bill, if you were around, when we were in Seoul, he was just sitting outside one of the, I don't know, I think it was the Oktoberfest tent that they had out there. And Frank and I just sat for a half an hour talking about America and Texas and Mexico. That's when I got to know him, is in one of the international Rotary meetings. It was really nice.
Who are we talking about?
About Frank, Sonny, what was his last name? Devlin?
Oh, yes.
Devlin.
Tell you that he had that personality. When you met him, you would never forget him.
That's right.
Yes.
That's true.
Yes, sir. I want to say thank you to all the Rotary clubs in El Paso. We serve food to UMC on Monday, to the doctors and nurses. And then on Tuesday, we went to the Children's Hospital, and all the clubs in El Paso and Anthony gave a donation for those foods. So hats off to all the Rotarians for Rotary. Gratefulness was this week.
Jimmy,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you for reminding me. It was give you guys a little bit more background. So Rotary put this initiative called Rotary Gratefulness Week, and being great Rotarians that we are, it was led by Camino Real Club, and we stepped in and we donated $350. A portion of that was from our club, and a few folks stepped in. Jennifer and Mike. A few folks from our club stepped in and gave additional donations. Thank you so much. What I didn't tell is we bought lunch for the hospital staff and medics. These guys are going through a lot of stress. So our contribution, we threw some money at it. It went really quick, but very impactful. And Jimmy, everyone did a great job out there. And we're so honored to have been able to participate and help out. And I think it was such a success because all the other clubs participated as well and helped out, that they're looking to expand it. So very thoughtful project. All right, so I think we could probably take it away, Catherine.
Okay. If we can bow our heads, please. Dear Lord, this is the time of year when Americans celebrate Thanksgiving. Help us realize that there are so many things to be grateful for, even with the challenges that are facing the world today. Please help heal those that are ill, and please stand by and support the caregivers as they help heal their patients and their families. Please remind us to be grateful for our family and friends, even if sometimes they get on our nerves. Help remind us to treat our employees and our fellow workers fairly. Help us to seek justice where it is needed. Help us to help those in need, not just in words, but in deeds. Help us to be the best that we can be. And dear Lord, please help Dr. Richard Pineda, PhD, give us a good presentation today as our keynote speaker. Help his bow tie stay straight as we all straighten ourselves in his presence. Help us to not space out during this Zoom meeting, as it is a skill and a discipline we are all working on. Please keep us healthy as we look forward to one day meeting again in 3D. Amen. And for the four-way pledge of the things we think, say, and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned?
All right. How about the let's kick off the pledge as well. Jamie, can you take the honors of the pledge?
Yes, please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, all right. Thank you, Jamie. Catherine, thank you so much. Catherine, don't go anywhere because I think there's a lot of stuff going on with you related. The spirit of giving. I think I got a slide on that. You could tell us a little bit more on that. But there, the children's Christmas party is coming up December 11th. Here's some background. And Craig Fortune, actually, let me rephrase that. Santa Claus, all the way from the North Pole, who comes down and visits the children's Christmas party, will be our pop-up guest. So Craig, if you are able to unmute yourself, and we're hoping that you're able to share a few stories, and after that, I'll give some outline, some facts about this great event. But Craig Fortune is our regular Santa Claus, and I'm sure he's got a few stories to share, and hopefully he'll make it down from the North Pole this year.
Can you hear me all right?
Coming clear.
Okay. Well, I joined Rotary in 2001. Jack Maxon got me in. I went on a group study exchange a year or two prior to Sweden, and you can't be in Rotary to go on one of those exchanges. I don't know if they have them anymore, but as a payback I've spent 6 weeks in Sweden, which was really fantastic. And then they like you to join Rotary after you get to do that, which I did do. And I joined in early 2001. It just turned out that your Santa Claus prior for the party, I guess, left the club or something. Anyway, you needed a Santa Claus, and I have had a Santa Claus outfit for the last 40 years. A friend of mine bought me the suit for his baby daughter and wanted me to be Santa Claus, and I had it. And then I kind of morphed into going to my friends' houses on Christmas Eve and visit their kids. I wasn't married, so I wasn't doing anything particularly fun on Christmas Eve. And I always had a Santa outfit, and he said, "Why don't you be our Santa Claus?" So I did do it. The first time I went to the party, I was new in the club, and I was with Jeff Miner and Ken George, and we had to rent a truck, go to Food City, buy the food, the stuff put in the stockings. We had to rent a locker to put all the stuff in the locker. And we were up in Pill Hill, some office up there, and all the stuff was there. And the three of us sorted it out, which took forever. And I remember thinking, that's probably how many are going to show up the next morning for the stocking stuffing. This is going to take all day. I don't know how we're going to do it. But then everybody showed up in the morning for the stocking stuffing, and we've certainly streamlined that process now. It's gone so well with Region 19. They take it so seriously. The first few programs, it's always been the 4,000 kids when I've been in Rotary at the Coliseum, but it used to be about a 30-minute presentation. They'd bus everybody in like they do now. And then they'd have a show, high school dancers, bands, clowns, just kind of a little party up on a stage. And that was about the first 6 or 7 years at least. That was the extent of the program, but the kids had a great time, and they kept making it better and better. And finally they got a story together about Santa Claus having a toothache, and a lot of the premise was take care of your teeth. And Region 19 had all the characters and all the lines. And I mean, they, as you can probably see in the last few times they've done it, they really go all out. And they had a script, and we had rehearsals, and all the Rotary, I'm not Rotary, but the Region 19 folks make their costumes, and they rehearse, and we rehearsed. We had a wonderful time. One interesting little story on one of the first few times we did it, we thought it'd be a good idea to give the kids apples. And that was really smart until we figured out that morning that they wouldn't fit in the stocking. They were way too big. And so we had a little fun trying to figure out how to do it. We ended up giving them to them on the buses as they left, but that didn't work. But we had to buy the stuff ourselves. And then Walmart came in and donated the food, which I think they're not doing it anymore, but that's such a great contribution for kids in El Paso. Somebody ought to be able to sell that sponsorship back. Walmart gave us big bags to put the stuff in. I mean, they're all taking Walmart goodies and bags home to all their families. So I bet we can probably find another sponsor for that. But it's morphed into a wonderful story now about Santa Claus going across the world and visiting places. And the last few years, we've with Books Are Gems, we've been able to give the kids really nice books. The individual classrooms talk about whatever the teacher goes and picks the book that they want to give to their class, and it's boys' books and girls' books. And they talk about the books, and before they go, they know what the books are going to be. And so kids really get a lot of nice stuff for the party itself. And Region 19, I can't say enough about how much they plan this out and make it worthwhile of all of us participating. It's a lot of fun. I've enjoyed being the Santa Claus every year, and I guess you're not needing me this year, right? I'm not going to be appearing. Is that right?
Oh, we are definitely needing you more than ever.
Well, what are you going to need from me? But I'll be available. But it's been quite fun doing that. That's what I guess they're 3 and 4 year old kids. That's just perfect. As I said, I've been doing Santa Claus for a lot of years, not so much recently, other than for Rotary. But that's the perfect age for Santa Claus. They are just enthralled when I go out and go among the kids. But it's been quite fun doing it, and can't wait to do it again next year with all the kids in attendance. I know it's a little difficult now, but it's been quite a partnership with Region 19, and they just go overboard and putting it on, as you can tell if you've been to the party itself. But
well, let's give Greg a big hand. So let's move on with the program. But Greg,
thank you very much.
Being a Santa Claus. And put this in your calendar. December 11th coming up. We will need Santa Claus, and actually we need you more than ever, because this year, instead of being at the Coliseum,
Yeah, I see it here.
30 different places. So we'll keep you posted. And by the way, this is a Rotary Club of El Paso tradition dating back from 1917. Over 100 years. During the 1930s, the project became a party for orphan children, serving more than 800 children from 15 area orphanages. And then the mid 1950s, it changed into the Children's Christmas Party, and now we partner up with Region 19. So put that in your calendar. Children's Christmas Party. It's going to be like a drive-through kind of drive-through parade where kids will not with their parents will drive through and pick up their stuffing stocking. All right, so Greg, thank you so much for. I believe this is you. It's a good picture of you. All right, so Catherine, there's Spirit of Giving is going on. Tell us a little bit more on it. Oh, you're on mute.
That's the quote of 2020. Blank, you're on mute. I am sorry to disappoint Mark and many of you. The good thing about the Spirit of Giving, the bad thing, I'll start with the bad things. It's always good to do that. We're not able to use the foundation room for the brass quintet because it is full. The foundation room is full of tables, and right up by the frieze where the screen is, that's where all the paper and the boxes and all the wrapping and all that kind of stuff's going on. So on that note, I don't know if you have, I know that I get every single purchase that is made for Spirit of Giving with all the organizations, including the Community Foundation. And by show of hands, who's just been on that website to just read some of those stories of what you're buying the gifts for? I was telling Mark earlier, there's like the Nazareth Living Center, there is a woman there who is 92 and she just wants a pair of gloves that doesn't have the fingers on them so she can still knit, but her hands get really cold during the day. These are small, beautiful gifts. And if you want to throw in a pair of slippers, that's great. The favorites that I like are the people from the Winchester House, which are boys, gentlemen. They're 18 years old, so they've aged out of the orphanage system, or excuse me, of this foster care system, but they're still technically orphans. I know sometimes I shouldn't use that word, but the Winchester House said use the word, they are. But they are in that transitional center area, and all they want are backpacks, deodorant, socks, just things that help them get through everyday life, just toiletries. So there's a lot of really neat stories on there and things that you can give. And Rotary beautifully committed to 50 tags. You can actually take 4 or 5 tags at once. I don't know if Leah's on the air. I don't see her face. Leah's already bought several, Leah Masters. And it's just sweet to read through these. And thank you for everyone that we're giving them to. We work through organizations, Reynolds Home, Winchester House, a whole bunch of them on there. But it's just neat, and it's a way that we can give back. And again, you can purchase it on your credit card. The community foundation can go out and buy everything. We wrap it, we deliver it, or that's why the rooms are so crazy right now. Or you can buy it and wrap it, or put it in a bag with the information on there so we know exactly who it's going to. So it's I'm a sap, as everyone who knows me knows. I cry easily, I get sucked into things easily, and I got sucked into this quick the first time we did it. And it's just neat, and it will make you feel good. It's kind of like the bike campaign that we're doing.
Thank you, Catherine, for leading this effort, and we're so happy to be able to help out. It's just, folks, it's just a click away. Just click on it and enter those numbers. It might take you 1 or 2 minutes. It's so simple to bring joy to someone, and especially in these tough times. So check it out, guys. Spirit of Giving. All right. So next up is introducing Hero of the Month. Now, this individual, you'll recognize this. I mean, he's one of those outstanding Rotarian. I'll tell you what, Andy gives me a call like almost every day. And when I see his number pop up on my phone, I get very excited because he always comes up with great ideas, and the conversation always starts like, hey, Yasser, I was thinking, I got this idea. And like from there, it's like, bring out the popcorn. I'm like a 5-year-old kid in story time, and just so full of great ideas. The amount of energy he brings to the club is just incredible. Him and his company, Evolve 7, and Carlos, you guys do a tremendous job. I want to show you guys this video of Andy, Hero of the Month of October.
Wow. Humbled to be Hero of the Month, especially since I'm not a hero. But in any case, hey, Rotary means a lot to me, which is why any work I volunteer for is a joy and not just another task that takes up my time. Obviously, I have a pretty busy schedule running 2 different companies, but I really treasure the time I'm able to spend with Rotary and performing something I hope of value to the club. Trying not to take on too much, which is probably not very true, but I do want to maintain and keep the quality of our branding and our imaging high, as I believe that will lead to greater impact in the community and growth of Rotary and growth of specifically Rotary Club of El Paso. So I decided to join Rotary way back when, many years ago, when I owned radio stations in Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo and Santa Maria, California. And I was a member of the Rotary Club of Santa Barbara for about 5 years until I ultimately sold the radio stations, moved away. And I didn't rejoin Rotary again right away as I moved from Santa Barbara to San Francisco and later on to Orange County. So I finally theoretically semi-retired and moved to El Paso, which is where I grew up, having attended UTEP and then later UT Austin, where I graduated. So I looked into the Rotary clubs here in El Paso and was pretty impressed when I checked out Rotary Club of El Paso and its amazing legacy and history and just its reputation. And I thought, I need to become a member of that Rotary club specifically. So I knew Kevin Tubbs, so I reached out and he invited me to a couple of meetings. He eventually sponsored me, and I became a Rotarian and specifically a member of the Rotary Club of El Paso, of which I'm very proud to be part of. You are an amazing group of people who clearly put service above self. And I've always wanted to give something back to the community that I have always, from the business side, taken from, hopefully with contributions, of course, but still wanted to do something that gave something back to the community. And Rotary Club of El Paso epitomizes that and does amazing things that I just couldn't be more proud to be part of an organization that does so much. So thanks for having me. I hope I can continue to deliver value to the organization and be a part of something that is absolutely amazing and does so much for the community. Thanks for having me again, and thank you.
Oh, Andy definitely deserves a round of applause. I mean, the commitment he has to our club is just incredible. Thank you so much, Andy. All right, so moving on, let's see here. Talking about running a meeting here is quite a production going between slides. Hey, we're still doing the bike drive. You guys should see Arlene's office just full of bikes. Get your bikes used, new helmets, whatever it is. We got a couple of more weeks on this, so get them in. Ruli's, our curbside wine fest is scheduled for December 3rd. I think it's 2 weeks away. This has been a very successful project, starting out with Dragonfly selling 46 tickets, and then Crave doubling that. So this is just going to keep on growing. Ruli's, do you get your tickets now on elpasowinefest.com? It's just enter your credit card information and make sure you get your meal set up. December 3rd coming up. So, and next up, Catherine, you are on the spotlight today. I want to share this video of our Showcase member series. Catherine, you are just on the spotlight today. So let me share this with you guys. This is our very own Catherine Berg, a short interview talking about the Rotary Club of El Paso.
Hi, I'm Catherine Berg. I work right upstairs when we are actually able to meet in the Community Foundation room. I'm Vice President for the El Paso Community Foundation, but that doesn't really matter right now. What I am here for is to talk to you about why I love Rotary. None of us can do it alone, right? And so the person that introduced me to Rotary is when I was 16 years old, I used to be a swimming coach at the YMCA on Trowbridge. And a guy named David Fulcher was the president of the East Side Y. And at the time, I was just the office girl and did anything and everything that I could do to earn extra money. And he would throw sheets of paper my way that had just handwriting on it, and I had to write for the Boll Weevil. The Boll Weevil was the Rotary Club of the East Side's newsletter. So that's how I get introduced to Rotary. And then years and years and years and years go by, I get back into my professional life. And then I started Pro Musica, and they said, well, you have to become part of Rotary. So at that time, I knew Eric Pearson from days past. Eric Pearson introduced me. I became a Rotarian way back when we were at the Presbyterian Church. I loved it there. Plenty of parking, and I always felt like the second grader. You walk in with your tray, and you try to find people you know, and I didn't know anybody, but everyone was always so welcoming. There were 2 or 3 tables that I don't care who you were, you weren't allowed to sit there. But I always found a place. I sat down, and I absolutely loved it. One of the first people I got to know was Mr. Weisenberger. And Mr. Weisenberger is the reason that I started doing all kinds of stuff in Rotary, because one day he came up to me and said, the person that's supposed to do programs, Stan Okies, he can't do it. So will you do it for me? I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. How can I do this? And I was like, oh, would it be fine? Hardest job of my frickin' life. But if I wouldn't have got to know a lot of people, and doing that, I became part of the board, and it was so much fun. And again, somewhere along the way too, you can't help but meet Sonny Brown, right? So here's the Rotary shirt. Should have the hair out of the way. There's the Rotary shirt, and this is a gift from Sonny Brown. I'm gonna get really close here so y'all can see it. It's a really feminine, beautiful gold bolo tie, and something tells me that this belonged to Anne. But a couple of years ago, Sonny beautifully, not cleaned out his stuff, but decided he was going to give a lot of pins to Rotary. So my presidential year, that was a lot of fun. We got to do trivia questions and pass out pins. That was fun. I enjoyed the heck out of that. I just want to say kudos to many of the people that, again, make this one big journey. Mike Atkins, my God, without your advice on what to do here and there, I would not know what in the world I was doing. It's my presidential year or any other year. Blake, when you cook brisket, I can't wait to get back there again. Nick Binion, you a little bit, but you know what? Your wife taught my girl all kinds of stuff. So go, Nick. John Donovan, he's my pool cleaner. He'll know what that means. Bonnie Farrell. Bonnie is a rock star. And I'm so happy that she's able to join us now in these meetings again. So happy to see your face, Bonnie. A lot of times it's from the nose down. So we need you to bring the camera up so we can see your eyeballs because you have beautiful eyeballs. And Bonnie knows Ida Oberstein. That's the town that I was born in Germany. And so I absolutely love her. Melena Field, right down the street from me, loving her. Corey, thank you for all your treasury help. Boy, don't all of us need that. Bill and Debbie Hicks, the presidential year that I had to go to Seoul, Korea, they came along and we did Seoul and Hong Kong. And I want to say they're the best traveling buddies in the whole wide world. Jennifer Horsley, you helped me out through some tough times. I'll leave that there. You know what I'm talking about. Oh my God, Matt Nyland and Maella. When I had all kinds of issues to do and stuff to be funny with in my meetings, you helped me out. Thank you for that. Leah Masters, the master of everything, just saying. David Mills, wow, I would not have known my sweet Brazilian boy without David Mills doing everything that you do with the youth partnerships. My God, you need some help. So if anyone's around here that gets into that, help David out. He needs some help there. Yasser, thank you for calling me your Rotary Light. I believe in that. I think Sonny has been my Rotary Light, and I think Al has been too. And I know this is getting long. Bob Tolan, thank you for giving me guts. You know what I mean by that. And Diane Smith. She doesn't always come to meetings, but man, we can't do anything the foundation without her. So I will close it there. Thank you for making us all a team. Rotarians are nothing. We can't do service above ourselves unless we have all of us doing service above ourselves. God bless you. I love you. See ya.
Catherine, you are just a prime example of the friendships that are made in Rotary. And I kid you not, I do have you listed in my phone as Catherine, my Rotary Light.
Oh my God. I have not seen that video. That was really long. I'm sorry.
Catherine, lead us, Mark Mathis is about to introduce our guest, but lead us into everybody, adjust your bow tie as Mark Mathis is getting ready to introduce today's program. So Mark, I want to fix your bow tie. Okay, and take it away, Mark.
All right. Yeah, gratefully, Dr. Pineda, I did not don my bow tie for you today, but anyway, I can go put it on during the talk. Dr. Richard Pineda, Associate Professor, Department of Communication. I think probably many of us here today know him, have heard him speak. He currently serves as Director of the Sam Donaldson Center for Communication Studies. And his research and teaching interests focus on politics, leadership, media, popular culture, and Latinidad. And he holds a BA in political science from Baylor, MA in communication from UTEP, and got his PhD from Wayne State in Detroit. And of course, you've seen his research appear in a number of communication journals, such as Text and Free Speech Yearbook. He's on the editorial boards of several publications, Argumentation probably being one of his most favorite, Argumentation and Advocacy, and Contemporary Argumentation and Debate. So I think we'll hear a bit about the need for debate in defining our issues. He also serves his community as a member of the City of El Paso Ethics Review Board and the Capital Improvement Advisory Board or Committee. He's in the director circle for the Stanley and Gerald Rubin Center for Visual Arts at UTEP. Grew up here in El Paso, and he is a proud graduate of Eastwood. Go Troopers. All right. Very well, Dr. Pineda, take it away.
Well, it's good to see that there's so much Eastwood love in the room. It's nice, and quite frankly, Catherine and I are pretty good friends. After going after Catherine, I could talk for an hour. It would still be shorter than Catherine's video. So it's all right. It's good. It's good. The bar's set wide. It really is a pleasure to be with you all this afternoon. When Mark had reached out to me. Part of the conversation at that point, it was actually before, I guess, the general election, and we talked a little bit about the prospect of me just kind of giving you an overview from my take on things. And that's kind of what I wanted to do today. I always start with the same caveat, both when I teach the political communication class or when I talk to people about politics, especially local politics. I view this very much as a strategic process, and a lot of times that that will make people seem to think that I'm pessimistic about things, but I'm not. I'm quite the opposite of that. I'm very optimistic about how we do things, and so sometimes you'll hear it and it'll seem a little bit jaded. But I want you to keep in mind that my perspective is very much from behind the scenes. And so I've worked with a number of campaigns. I've worked with a number of candidates at different levels for different reasons. But as Mark alluded, I was a high school debater at Eastwood, and then I went to Baylor and I debated at Baylor, and then I coached debate all the way through my PhD. And so I do a lot of executive coaching. I do a lot of candidate coaching, and I've worked with folks not only just to get them up and speaking, but also to deal with the debates. So when you watch a debate, one of the really interesting things is that it doesn't matter, whether it totally devolves as it did with that first presidential debate, or if there's some real structure and substance. They have a number of coaches that come in and work with them. And I can answer questions about that. A lot of people don't actually realize that those are much more scripted than you would be led to believe. But I want to talk about three things and leave a little bit of time for you all to answer or to ask questions if you have any of me. But I wanted to talk about three things that I thought were sort of big at the end of this election season. So the first one was polling. So a lot of people are, they're throwing their hands up in the air and they're saying, oh, this polling is so wrong and we don't get it. And why is this a problem? And how is this doing what it's doing in terms of politics? And I want to sort of disabuse anybody of this notion. The polling is actually not wrong. The polling is reported badly, right? That's the real issue. And the way that that polling actually works is that's exactly how President-elect Biden was able to flip places in the United States, because they've got their own strategic polling that's very good at micro-targeting voters and micro-targeting issues when it comes to voters. And so I think one of the big problems, and this may be a bigger issue, is that it's largely how the media interprets polls and how the media deals with data and tries to explain that to viewers. And I think to a great extent, what they do is they make it worse by trying to oversimplify what goes on. But if you think about how polling works, I think that in this last election cycle, even though some of the general predictions were off, it's quite clear that the folks working those numbers inside the Biden campaign had a very good sense of what they could do and where. Otherwise, you wouldn't have transitions in certain states like Arizona and certainly in Pennsylvania. So I think that's important to keep in mind, and I can talk a little bit more about that if you all have questions. I mean, the one thing that I think is a bigger problem than polling, is that now when it comes to an election, whether we're talking about the city of El Paso or we're talking about the United States, we're no longer trying to appeal to a whole cluster of voters. In other words, when I run for office, whether I'm running for city council or if I'm running for the presidency, I'm not trying to appeal to every single voter in my universe. And the reason that's a problem is because it builds off of data that is publicly available, that we have access to, and it essentially allows me to target. So you'll hear people talking about like block walking, right? And this was a weird season because of the virus, but block walking is one of these. It's a theme that's used a lot in Canada. We'll say, well, I burned through 3 pairs of shoes walking neighborhoods, and it's part of a narrative about sort of good old fashioned American democracy that I put my heart and soul into this, which is true. Except that if you look at a city block, and I can do this with almost any neighborhood in El Paso, I can isolate exactly who you would want to go knock on a door in that neighborhood so that you wouldn't waste your time. And this is one of those moments when people get, I think, kind of antsy about this idea. But I mean, think about this. If I've got a neighborhood of, let's start with 5 voters, okay? So that means that around my house, I've got 5 voters. I can look at the voting records for each of those 5 houses. And I discover that I'm a Democratic candidate. And I discover that of those 5 neighbors, 2 neighbors are really super Republican. That is that they vote Republican almost consistently in every election. So I take those 2 people off of my list. I'm not going to go to their door. I wouldn't spend the time there because I don't think I can convince them, and I don't think they're going to swing to my side. So now I've got 3 voters. Of those 3 voters, I've got 1 voter who never ever votes, right? So I take them off the list. Now I've got 2 voters, and of those 2 voters, I've got somebody who votes 90% of the time in an election. I've got somebody who voted 10 years ago in an election. So that means now I'm down to 1 voter out of those 5. So imagine that as a microcosm across a town or across a country. I can get rid of people in terms of where I'm going to spend my time. But here's the downside of that. Those 5 people are still affected by taxes. Those 5 people are still affected by political issues. Those 5 people are still affected by their desire to participate in civil society. But I've isolated 1 because their data is the only thing that I can isolate as being valuable to actually act on. And that's actually one of the challenges that we have right now. The second thing I want to talk about is the runoff. I mean, this is going to be probably the most pressing issue in the next couple of weeks leading into December. That's the runoff race between current mayor Dee Margo and former mayor Oscar Leeser. Couple of things about this one that are very intriguing to me. Number one, we're going to go from having a record number of participants and voters in an election with that general election and those records we set to, I think, almost an infinitesimal amount of voters in that runoff. I think that the mayor's office will probably be decided by, a couple of thousand voters, if that. And that's problematic, right? Because it means that not a lot of people are vesting their time and interest in what could have some serious implications for what happens here. I have said, probably to the chagrin of Mayor Margo, that I think that the runoff election will ultimately be a referendum on how people perceive that he's handled the pandemic. I think this election was largely influenced by the pandemic. I think that's probably what really flipped the script at the presidential level. But I think it's going to be an issue here. So if you feel like the city government and municipal government has done well, then my guess is that you would cast for the mayor. If you don't think that they've done well, you'll probably cast for the former mayor. I don't necessarily know that there's anything interesting in that, except what I will say from a strategic perspective is I've been really surprised to see how both men have campaigned, and especially the way they're campaigning right now. And I'll tell you why I think that's interesting. I am a little bit surprised by the inconsistency in messaging that's come about. And I think this is why this is sort of problematic. I think the sort of pressing issue for El Pasoans right now is the pandemic. And if you look at the campaign messaging all assumes the world before the pandemic. So it assumes the economy, it assumes the status of the police department, it assumes the status of our bond issue. And that's interesting because in some ways those things are sort of, I used to joke about this with when I was coaching debaters, that you can't argue through a wall. Right. In other words, there's a thing that essentially is a hard stop, and trying to convince people that there's still some value in those other points. There is, but the problem is that now this has become largely a conversation that's dominant about the pandemic, and that is interesting because it's not reflected as of yet in the campaigns themselves. And the third thing I want to talk about is social media, because I think in some ways we're in a weird spot politically. And I think we're in a weird spot largely because of the nature of social media and the way that we participate in social media, especially when it comes to politics. And I say this because I think what social media has done, social media is very shallow, creates a lot of shallow engagement, and it's also very transitory. And here's what I mean. If somebody that you know in your social media world puts up something that's political, and you agree with it, you believe that their sentiment is spot on, you can give it a thumbs up, you can give it a heart, but very often that's the end of your obligation to engage in that discourse, right? Somebody says, Joe Biden, yes, and you say, yeah, me too, right? And then you walk away from it and you move on to the next thing. And it's very shallow. So we don't take that as an impetus to give money. We don't take that as a way to connect. We just sort of say like, okay, good job. On the flip side of that, if somebody puts up something that we don't like, our engagement is even more minimal, right? So if somebody puts up something politically that we just don't like, or we find is the opposite of the way we look at the world, we give it a thumbs down, or we might throw a grenade, right? I use this metaphor all the time. We throw a grenade, we let it blow up, and sometimes we don't even sit around to watch it blow up, right? We just throw it and we walk away. And in particular, the number of people that I find this interesting with my students, right? They're a barometer of how we do things. And you'll talk to students and you'll hear them say, I unfriended somebody. And the language of that is so interesting to me, right? Because if you think about the person that people you're really close with, right? Like your Rotary group, what it would mean to say, for example, to Catherine Berg, I unfriended Catherine Berg, right? It comes with consequences. It comes with some emotive responsibility. It comes with all of these different kinds of factors. If I go to the rest of the group and I say, hey, everyone, I unfriended Catherine Berg, like I'm not going to be friends with her anymore, there's going to be a lot of ripple and people are going to want to know what happened, and there are going to be people attempting to try to resolve that relationship. But think about that in the social media context. I unfriended somebody. Well, okay, sky is blue, the sun is hot. Right? We don't think about that. And the problem is that transitory engagement that we have, like Facebook is really deceiving. And I teach a big class at UTEP. I always have 200 students in a big auditorium. And I ask them this question. I say, how many of you have more than 500 friends on Facebook? And I promise you, it's almost the entire auditorium of students. I do. Okay. How many of you have more than 1,000 friends on Facebook? Another big portion of the auditorium still keeping their hands up. I say, how many of you don't know 10 neighbors in your neighborhood? Same amount of hands go up, right? So they don't have any kind of community connection, but for some reason they're friends with 1,000 people in a world that requires no commitment on their part. But then the challenge with that is that they're also set off and shift and engage in those kinds of ways, and they don't necessarily push back on the conversations because
you know what I'm craving?
you don't want to have that kind of conversation. Like it doesn't resonate, or it creates these problems. And so politically, social media is something that is really problematic, partly because we're not engaging in a social discourse in the way that we would in the past. And here's the kicker: social media and that digital space has been weaponized, and that's the part that everybody should be afraid of. It's people keep talking about Chinese influence, Russian influence, hackers, all that sort of stuff. I think that that's significant. I mean, we should be thinking about that. But the reason that it's dangerous is because it doesn't take a lot of disinformation to get people totally off the track. And I'm not even talking about the political stuff, right? We could talk about that if you've got questions. But I'm talking just about this, okay? If you have ever opened your Facebook page and one of your friends has posted the obituary of a celebrity that has died more than 2 years ago, they essentially are giving you an insight to the microcosm of how quickly false information moves from cluster to cluster, right? And this happens almost for me on a weekly basis. Somebody will say, oh, Gene Wilder died, right? That's so sad. And then somebody will say, but yeah, he died 3 years ago. And then the person doesn't know what to do. They're like, well, it's still sad, right? But they won't back off of it. They've committed to it, and so they'll keep it up there. But here's the thing, right? That is a simple example. And I promise, if you pay attention to this and you see that somebody posts, that one jumped out of my mind because it was the most recent. Somebody posted Gene Wilder's obituary. Within about 2 hours, other people in different parts of my Facebook universe were posting the same obituary, right? And that's what's interesting, is that it jumps in these it magnifies really quickly. And that's the part that's intriguing, because it means that we are more susceptible to passing around fake information or information that's old or information that's not accurate, because it's a lot easier, right? Think about that. You read the obituaries in the morning, right? You find out that somebody passed away. How often do you pick up the phone and call 20 people to tell them that happened? Maybe every once in a while you do, right? If it's something that's really shocking or somebody that you didn't know. But if you think about that, we don't do that on a daily basis. But on Facebook, as an example, or social media, it takes one click. And we think, oh, I'm doing my part to share information with you. And that's what I think is so interesting to me, is because when it comes to the political stuff, there's a lot that's just not accurate, but it gets put forward very quickly. And the other thing is that we don't fact check for whatever reason, we just don't fact check. And instead we act as a repeater and we repeat that information out. And so in my mind, that's actually the biggest issue of concern politically, I think that we face right now, is that social media is become ubiquitous, and it's largely dangerous because we exist in that world for some reason in a very different way than if we're face to face. And it has a rollover effect, which means that we want to have face to face conversations. We're a lot more leery about how we do that because we're training ourselves in a different way interpersonally. And so that's a whole other thing. But those are kind of the three things that I thought were the most interesting. I mean, I can answer a lot of different questions, and as many of you know, I do this a lot. I mean, I end up talking a lot on media for different reasons and different kinds of things. But I'm always happy to talk about any of those things. So you can, I don't know what's easier. You could probably raise your hand. I think that function is on, or if you just start talking, I can probably see you on the screen. Craig, you're on mute.
Explain to me again why you said that the polling wasn't that bad when it seemed to be terribly bad. I mean, look, we had Biden winning in a landslide, almost every one. And I think a lot of it was people like me maybe won't say they voted for Trump.
Sure.
Somebody calls and they won't say anything, but
sure.
it was almost a joke, and
Well,
also possibly politically motivated joke to create a landslide effect.
I'm not sure that that's. I mean, I don't disagree with you that the reporting of it was that it was going to be a landslide, but the proof of the pudding is that the Biden team knew exactly where to place their resources and emphasis, and it's part of the reason that the Trump team was so surprised. The internal polling, which uses some of the same models, was not inaccurate, and in fact, what I think you're going to hear, usually it's going to take a while. This one's going to take a lot longer before it comes out. But usually by about February or March, there'll be conversations between Republican strategists and Democratic strategists. There's a series they do at American University where they have them get together and they'll have them talk about it. The reporting was wrong, Craig, and I think that the reporting might be politically motivated. But the truth of the matter is that the reporting is wrong because reporters don't know how to interpret data. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time with our students at UTEP in communication is that we've worked on data-driven journalism. So a lot of our kids that are coming out now not only understand how to take data, but how to report it accurately. The funny thing about whether or not it was portrayed as a landslide, I mean, it cuts both ways, right? To a certain extent, there was some conversation of that from media sources on both sides, and as to what the intent was or how it worked for voters, I don't necessarily know that it shifted that. I honestly think the biggest challenge that the Republicans had going into this particular election was that the president probably got voter turnout to be lower than expected. I think starting the messaging about the fraud, or whether or not the system was biased, or that there was going to be all of these problems, I think that actually supercharged the turnout, and I think it supercharged the turnout on both sides. But again, I think that the proof is in the pudding. I think that if you look at the counties where the Biden campaign spent money, especially in Philadelphia, and especially in Arizona, if you look at where their ad buys were, it overlaps with the places that they won. And what that tells me is that the data that they had did two things. It was more accurate in predicting what turnout would be like. And here's the thing that especially folks in media misunderstood. It didn't evaluate what we would call low propensity voters. And those low propensity voters turned out. Those are young voters. Those are voters that are of a certain socioeconomic status. And those low propensity voters turned out in a way that they didn't in the previous election. And so I think part of the problem is that we accepted the narrative that the media presented without actually asking to look at the data. And I think that's sort of the problem we have right now, right? I mean, we're not looking at what's coming out in literal precinct by precinct analysis.
I would agree that the Biden people probably had it right. It's just that they didn't want that out, that it was going to be closer than it was. I mean, and then the media put it out as a pretty substantial lead for Biden in all those states. So I guess that's my point. I'm sure they had, I'm sure the inner circles had it right, and they had it much closer, but that never got out.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you the flip example of that is, right, turning Texas blue. I mean, this was part of the bet the efforts on Powered by People. I mean, they virtually moved the needle almost nothing. But in that case, part of the difference was, and I don't think anybody ever understood this. I mean, I talked about this a couple of times in media interviews. People didn't recognize this was going to be a cause and effect thing, right? Democrats in Texas have been talking about turning the state blue. That's what powered a lot of this sort of movement that Congressman O'Rourke had. But everybody assumed that was going to happen in a vacuum, right? That all of a sudden Democrats were just going to come out of the woodwork and you'd flip the state. Nobody ever looked at the other side of the equation and said, hey, if you push the balloon on this side, guess what happens on the other side? Republicans are going to come out, right? And that's, I mean, so some part of this, I think, is we want to believe the narrative that I think feeds our perspective. And it's one of the things that I always talk about, with what I used to talk about with my debaters, which is that you got to be able to flip both sides of those things and split the middle, because I think one of the challenges is that we're not quite, and we're losing our ability to understand this. I mean, there's a lot of problems with the polling technology, but some part of it too is that we want the polls to kind of give us this give us this insight to how things are going to happen. But I don't think that's right. And the more polarized we become from a media perspective, the harder it is to kind of find that middle space. Yasser.
Yes, sir. Switching gears, you mentioned how you have all this data and to target voters. How is online data, for example, if I click on something that I like that's either pro gun control or against, and then maybe I go to a website that's more sensitive to environmental legislation, and is this data being tracked and sold to target myself as a voter, or how is this all coming together?
So no, but it is being tracked. So there are two issues here. The data that I'm talking about when it comes to micro-targeting voters is literally available from the county, right? So you can go to the county elections office. You can buy. It should be processed relatively soon. It'll come out in the next, I guess, month or so. It's literally the ballot results from the entirety of the county. Anybody who's registered, anybody who voted, they can track. And so you take an algorithm, and from that algorithm, you start to put data points essentially on a sheet. So for example, I could go back and I could look at my name, and it would tell me how many elections I voted in, as long as they've got record, and it'll tell me which way I voted in those elections. So I can find if I'm a likely Democrat or likely Republican voter. The data that you're talking about is actually tracked and is used for different reasons, but those are largely algorithms driven by consumer models, right? So that's why when you look for something on your computer, you look up a product, and then the next time that you get on Facebook, the ads are embedded inside your Facebook frame. The computer is sending those algorithms up, and they're getting crunched really, really quickly. Some of that data is useful for election and for political campaigning. The best example of that is in 2020, the George W. Bush campaign was very smart, and they went back and they looked at cable television channels, and they looked at cable television channels where voters that fit their model for Republican voters, what they were watching, and they discovered a gold mine of places that ads had not been purchased. And that included the Golf Network, which runs heavy duty male, runs heavy duty Republican, but there were no political ads on the Golf Network, so they bought a huge chunk of time there. What I think is now called the Outdoor Living Network, OLN. It used to be called something else, I think. Same thing. They discovered that there were a viewership that was really partisan. So they took that data, they took it to their ad people, and they said, buy us ads on these channels because we haven't gotten penetration to those particular places. So the data can be used that way, but largely, like when you're on the internet, that data ends up being sold commercially. which isn't, I mean, has its own problems. But I will say this, and this is another one of my points about why social media is so problematic. Periodically, you will have one of your friends on Facebook, or maybe you've done this, repost that image that says, I hereby say to Facebook, you may not use any of my information, blah, 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 right? You do this all the time. I always kind of chuckle at that, right? Because you're on a private service that has no responsibility to limit what it does with your data, right? You have gone into their house, and once you cross the threshold, this is like the vampire cautionary tale, right? Once you're past the threshold and you're there, they can do whatever they want with your images, your pictures, your data, right? You have availed yourself of the private good. And that one's always kind of interesting to me because people use that and are problematic. I mean, it becomes problematic in that way. This is going to be the next fight. I mean, you're already seeing this question of how much they can limit and what they'll limit people using for. I mean, Twitter's under a lot of heat about this because of the president and the nature in which he posted on that. I mean, the questions of how much Facebook and some of these other social media sites know when they've been infiltrated by somebody who is spoofing an identity or whatever. And if you've watched any of these documentaries about these Russian collectives that are sort of moving in mass, I mean, they're pretty good at being able to create false personalities, and they're able to put that up there. But I'll say this, like, as much as this has now become the sort of guiding idea or the one of the premises of Facebook, I publish things or get quoted a lot of times in just mass media, and probably I've been at UTEP for 17 years, and starting probably I don't know, maybe 12 years ago, I was quoted extensively in a report, I think in the Dallas Morning News, and I made the mistake of reading the comments, right? The comment was about immigration, so you can imagine the comments are kind of all over the place. But I read one comment that didn't make any sense to me. Like it didn't reference what I had talked about. And being a professor and somebody who's always looking for plagiarism, I highlighted the quotation that was in that comment, and I shot it through Google. And sure enough, that comment shows up all over newspaper articles related to immigration, which means that somebody had set an alert to go out anytime that a story about immigration was going to be produced. And this person or this group automatically posted this response in the comment section on those stories. And so even before this was a outside influence, Russian, Chinese, I mean, this was something that I think people had been using to sort of get their message out, or to spread their message way before Facebook or some of these other issues. And so I'm always a little bit leery about how we use that stuff, but definitely a point of concern about the research and where things are at. I mean, I'll say this, and I know you all have a hard stop, so I'll wrap it up. I think that there are a bunch of really interesting things about how we do elections. And I'll say, I know Joe's in the room, so this will be a little bit awkward, but if you look at the work that Lisa Wise did for the county over this last election, it's remarkable. I mean, it is remarkable. I mean, we had safe voting sites. We had efficient voting sites. We had the little baggies with the swipes and the I mean, everything was taken care of. So when you put us in comparison to other counties in the state of Texas, and you put us in comparison to other parts of the United States, we had somebody who, by virtue of doing her job at an excellent level, made sure that our process was going to be as close to flawless as possible. And I think that's the thing. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, why some of the comments about, cooked elections or fraud or those things, I mean, the reason that they're dispiriting is because there's people who are willing to do this and are willing to do this as their job, and they're willing to volunteer. And this idea that we would say, like, these people are committing fraud, I mean, that just, oh man, it irks me to no end. And that's about see, that's a Catherine Berg. If I was in a different setting, if Catherine wasn't right next to me, I would have said something far worse. But Catherine has toned down my vocabulary, so it irks me. Anyway, listen, I know that you all have an end to the meeting. I would love to chat more, and I'm happy to stick around if anybody has other questions. But thanks so much for having me this afternoon, and please go vote in the runoff. please.
Yeah.
Dr. Pineda, and I'd like to invite everyone to unmute yourself. And Dr. Pineda, it's always very interesting to see your presentations and hear you speak. I'm a big fan of yours. And thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you very much. That means a lot. Thank you.
And you might see a lot of bow ties here for some reason.
I saw that. Hey, I'm gonna guess that was a Catherine Berg style move, and I appreciate that.
Just want to jump on it. Yes, Kath. But very interesting. I think I'm getting the algorithms. I keep getting both types keep popping up now on my search. So I understand what you're talking about with algorithms. But anyone else have any other questions or anything? But let's give Dr. Pineda a big hand for joining us. All right, guys, there's no Rotary meeting, I believe, next week. Next week is Turkey Day, so tough times, but let's be thankful that we have good health and we have each other. And remember, guys, Rotary opens opportunities. So we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.
I have
Thank you, Yasser.
a big comment to Dr. Pineda, Yasser.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll stick around. I'm happy to.
So I'm proud to say I was a Trump voter. I'm a Republican, but as a marketer, I was very disappointed at their campaign because in El Paso, you notice there was a lot of text campaigns from the Biden administration. And that actually swayed a lot of my relatives. I did take a poll within my family, and it did sway them. I think 80+% of El Pasoans text. We're like the #1 for texting. And I was shocked by that. So I wanted to know your thoughts on texting.
So, I mean, this is back to Craig's question. I mean, this is one of the interesting things. The cell phone data and how we use our cell phones, I think, potentially has the most impact in terms of political outreach in these next couple of cycles. I think that the challenge with that is the number of times that you get those messages. So we always talk about, like, when we talk to candidates, we tell them that previous to this generation or previous to this particular election cycle, we wanted 3 touches from a candidate to a potential voter. So a mailer is 1 touch, a door hanger is a 2nd touch, a phone call is a 3rd touch. I talked to somebody sort of unofficially in this cycle, and I said, you probably need to think about that as 5 touches, because we can't go door to door anymore. We can't go to a lot of these public events that are normally like the places that you would get people to go to. So you almost have to magnify this to 5 touches. And the way that you fill in that space, Erica, is exactly that. It's using text messages, and it's hitting people. I think the challenge, and I'll say this because I'm as I tell my students this all the time. I mean, sorry, they're doing something here in the house. Listen, I'm a Democrat, but as again, for me, this is a strategy question. I'm thinking about strategy. I got to tell you that the challenge that the Republicans will always have in the county is they don't start early enough with candidates, and they keep pulling candidates that are less than desirable for a number of different reasons. And I think this happens over and over again. And I say this all the time because I think if you really want to shift the conversation, it needs to be a better pool of candidates. And then once you get that better pool of candidates, then I think you can target. I don't know that texting would change voter outcomes in terms of like Republican output in the county. I don't think that's going to work. But I do think that it's become an easier way to do it. The problem is that there's going to be a narrow window of efficacy, right? So in other words, people will use that. It may work well in this particular moment because we don't have these other places to go to. So our phone then becomes this extra lifeline. But I think on the flip side of it, at a certain point, those messages are going to be too much. And they'll have this sort of net negative effect that people will say, well, I don't want to participate or engage in this particular, this process anymore. They're going to block numbers or those sorts of things. But I think that's the secret sauce. I think they bought, a bunch of different groups bought that data. And here's one last thing. I'm chock full of these weird little trivia points, as you can tell. I can tell whose list was bought by who when the mail comes to my house, right? And this is it's a nerdy thing, but I know this. So one of the ways that you know whose list was purchased is if they have already collapsed everyone in the house. So in other words, if I get a mailer that's addressed to, because my mother-in-law lives with me, if I get a mailer that's addressed to the Pineda and Perez families, I know that list was generated by Beto O'Rourke's people a couple of years ago. And the reason is because they did a very good job culling the data. So here's the thing, right? And again, I don't want to get lost in the weeds, but I obviously love talking about this stuff. when I do a mailer, right, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get down the maximum bang for my buck. So I want a mailer to cost me 3 cents. If it costs me more than 3 cents, I'm wasting money. And that's the other thing. When I get a mailer, I know exactly that you've got professional advice or not. If I get a multicolor mailer, you're wasting money. If I get a mailer that has a lot of text, you're wasting money. If I've got a mailer that has a big picture of you, you're wasting your money, right? I can tell you that you've been bamboozled by somebody in a sales perspective. I can also tell if that mail has been addressed. If I get 3 mailers, which is what I did for one of the mayoral campaigns, you haven't done your job with data, right? Because what that means is nobody sat down and said, hey, wait a minute, there's 3 people that live at this address. Why would I send 3 different mailers there when I can combine those and make it one combined address, right? The people that did that was the people that ran O'Rourke's Senate campaign. But then that becomes data that you sell, right? Because then I can say, well, I've got this list of voters. The way that I know, there was this kind of like mini controversy because one of Veronica Carbajal made a point of saying that there might be voter fraud because when somebody went to the voting booth, they couldn't vote for her. And I knew exactly what happened. The second that story broke, I knew exactly what happened. They bought a list of data that had previously been used by the Reyes campaign, and that data did not take people out of the various borders. And so what happened was that Carbajal mailers were going to El Paso County. They were going to people that live in Tornillo. Tornillo doesn't get to vote in the city election, right? It's in the county, not in El Paso. But as soon as that story broke, I was like, they've got the Reyes data, right? And this is what's so interesting is that once you know what this looks like, it's very easy to pull apart some of these kinds of things. And so back to Yasser's question, I don't send, if I'm smart in a partisan race, I'm not going to send those mailers. Like I'm not going to send a Trump mailer to a Democratic House. Why would I, right? That's 3 cents down the drain. And people laugh about this because, well, it's only 3 cents. Yeah, but it grows exponentially, right? So now I'm at $300, I'm at $3,000. I can move that money someplace else without wasting into those spaces. And so the data is super valuable. And here's one, some of you will know this, some of you will remember this. When Luther Jones was arrested and when sort of all of that world started to fall apart, one of the reasons that Jones was so powerful was because he had data and he had somebody that knew how to crack the algorithm on the data. Previous to this, you could get these voting lists. I mean, they're public record, they're available by law, but what you would do with it was, it was kind of hard. You weren't really sure. We didn't really start using computer things, but Jones had somebody who was able to put together an algorithm that said, you want to target voters to win in this district? I've got that list. The challenge was at that particular moment, that was very, it came with like the Godfather promise, right? You owe me something down the road. And then what happened was that data became, when the rule group came to town, right? And not came to town, but the rule group started essentially saying, look, we'll sell the data to anybody, and it's an asset that you can put into play, right? I mean, Craig knows this. I mean, then that changes the game because now all of a sudden, it doesn't come with an implicit, like, you're going to owe me because you understand the Rosetta Stone. It's the Rosetta Stone cost you $1,000. All are welcome to take advantage of that. But data is super powerful. And if you look at any of these lists, if you look at how well they're put together, how composite they are, like, it doesn't take very much for me to look at some of this and sort of say, this is whose list is working. This is where the list is not at. This is who's done a bad job with the data. I mean, like, I can, anytime these things come to my house and I get more than one, I'm like, man, you did a bad job. And if you did that bad job with us, because we're essentially 100%, I mean, I think my mother-in-law, maybe not as much, but we're essentially 100% voting household. And so when I'm getting, 3 different mailers, I'm thinking to myself, you haven't done this right, you haven't done it right for other reasons. They asked one of the Times called the other day and said, what has to happen in this next race? This runoff race for the mayor is going to be tricky to a certain extent, largely because, I think that it's going to be a referendum on COVID, but it's also hard to beat back name recognition. And this is the question. And I think this is a realistic question. My guess is as Rotarians, you're politically involved, you have your commitment to the process. I would bet there's a lot of people that could not pick Mayor Margot out of a lineup. Honestly, I would be willing to bet top dollar you could go into certain neighborhoods and you could put him in front of their house and they wouldn't have any idea who that person is. I think you could take Oscar Leeser to almost every neighborhood in town and they would know who he is. And that's the ubiquity of the car commercials, right? Good or bad. I mean, there's no value assessment for either of those. As I joke, they both are irritated with me all the time for different reasons. So, I'm happy to be in that spot. But I mean, I think that's where it is. And so it's this idea of name recognition. And it's hard for a candidate sometime to think about that. But I mean, if you imagine even the scope of being mayor, being in front of camera a lot, just by that, there's still a shortfall or a gap. But yeah, I mean, Erica, go back to the party. Tell them that. I mean, I keep saying this. I say this a lot in the news. In fact, I can't remember who called me a couple of years ago, and she was like, "Will you help me? Will you help me make the Republican Party better?" And I said, "Well, no, I'm not gonna." But I mean, there's so many things that I'm like, seriously, county Republicans, like, come on. Like sometimes it's a clown car. I'm like, what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing over there? Like, it's okay. I mean, have your beliefs, be Trump voters, like go all in. I'm all for that. But sometimes I shake my head. I'm like, did you guys think about that before what happened? What happened there? And I do, like every time I see the results, like I did, again, no offense, but the woman, and I look, if you run for an office, you're better than I am. Like I would never put myself out there in that way. But the woman that ran for Congress that was like, I demand a recount. And I was like, really? Really? A recount? Really? Because that's, I mean, that wasn't like 10 votes that we should like dig deep in the pile. I mean, there was like thousands and thousands. And so even a part of me was like, interesting strategy. I like it. I like what you're doing. You're going to creep up the backside. Perhaps those, perhaps that those thousands of votes have been waiting someplace. But I'm like, And look, I mean, I'm, as I told you, I'm very much like strategy oriented. And I there's plenty of ways in which I see these things that are probably a little bit off the cuff from other folks. But anyway, anything else? Other questions? I'm happy to. Craig, I think you're on mute, or maybe you're talking to somebody else.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Well, I've got some good rural group stories for you if you ever want to hear it.
I bet you.
When we first started the company, I was a Republican, my partner was a Democrat, and we were like selling repeating rifles out west. If the Indians wanted to come get them, as long as they said they were going to shoot game, we'd sell it.
No, you guys really cracked open the political process. No, you cracked open the political process from that, like kicking open the idea that data is by itself shouldn't come with hooks. I mean, it's a different part of the process.
But yeah, it's fun that you remembered us. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Rihanna. I'm also not ashamed to say I'm a Cowboy fan. We're not doing hot right now, but I'm a die-hard Cowboy fan.
Right.
You're a Montwood alumni, so I think there might be sometimes Eastwood Montwood alumni rivalry.
Hey, Eastwood over here.
Hey, when I was in high school, that was like where bonfires were. The fact that there's like a whole community out there now is a real shock to me every once in a while. I'm like, how about that?
Enjoyed the meeting.
Anything?
Bye-bye.
Bye, Craig. Anything else? Anything else I might have? David, you got a question?
David, you're on mute.
David Mills.
There you go.
There you go, David.
You're good, David. We can hear you.
We can hear you now, David.
Which to David? David Mills?
David Mills. Oh,
okay. I was waiting goodbye, but I sort of do have a question. The question is this. You made reference earlier to that the data would show how people voted. I mean, does the data simply show what party you registered under or who you voted for?
It shows who you voted for. Remember that the government writ large treats that as open information. And so you don't ever have to tell anybody that. That's one of the big issues, is that exit polls look different than what actually happens in voting, because they don't have access to the data at the moment. But what it does, the Democratic Party has something called the voter, what do they call that? It's the van, and that allows you to pull up a person's name. It allows you to show how many times they voted in the span of data, and in that case, it shows. I think it shows the votes cast in partisan races. So it doesn't, like, if you vote in a city council race only, they wouldn't know what your proclivity is, because those are not coded by partisan affiliation.
So basically, the secret vote is not a secret vote.
It was never intended to be a secret vote. It was intended for you and the government to know what was going on. But the problem is that since it's classified as a record, a public record, right? And that's the question and the issue that's out there right now, which is, you know, if we can look at like who voted and how voted, right? I mean, that's the way they know. For example, like I don't know if you followed any of these stories, right? But the big story was like, you know, person X is dead and they voted. The reason we know that is because there's a name and there's a vote, and somebody gets access to look at that. So anybody who wants to challenge can pull voter pools and look at how those votes come down. And anybody who is, in the case afterwards, looking at data collection can do that. Now, I couldn't, like, if I just went down to the county office right now and said, I want to know how David Mills voted, they couldn't tell me that, and they wouldn't tell me that, but they would sell me the whole data set, which usually comes on a CD-ROM, and then I would have to figure it out.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm also sometimes cannot. I mean, sometimes some of this stuff people are like, really? That's how that works? I'm like, yeah, they know a lot. I mean, they're willing to, you know, to do stuff with that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess. I think was there somebody else? I thought there was one more, but if not, good. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Keep talking with the popcorn. I'm just like.
Oh, no, listen, that's the worst. That's the worst situation. You can ask Catherine this. If you get me wound up.
But look, you kept all these people on. Everybody's, I mean, that's impressive.
We're all like,
I know, it's like, tell us more. I did not know that everybody, David, I'm with you. I think David just clicked off, but I didn't know that people knew, or that there was a way to find out who I voted for.
Well, I mean, think about it.
It makes sense, though. I mean,
it's the ultimate public record, right? It's the way that we know, and you're actively participating in it, which is why. So what's going to be really interesting about this runoff election, that's what I was going to say before I lost my train of thought. So there's two things that are kind of mystifying to me, and I said this to the Times. This is going to probably irritate both of those guys. And it's that neither of them seem to be really running a runoff campaign. Like they seem to be just kind of using inertia. So some of you got an electronic mailer, I think today, from DeMargo. It's a side-by-side comparison between he and Oscar Leeser. But so far, and I think this is a real disservice, I guess, in terms of how they reach out to the voters, neither of them are running a runoff campaign in my mind. What they're doing essentially is just relying on momentum to carry them forward. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess if that's your choice, that favors Leeser, right? Because there's a lot of obstacles that are harder to pull off between now and the election. And what I always tell people, and this is what I think, this is the part of the reason that I say that I look at this as a strategy thing to like make sure that people don't they're not thrown off by this, but is the idea that I think some of this stuff is largely the inability to message correctly and to find a way to communicate. And so I think that there's some interesting things that have really there's just a challenge in how the messaging goes out, and I think that's going to be a problem for both of them in this next little run. I mean, and it's okay. I mean, I don't know that it would change things, but I do think that there's a shortfall in rethinking the strategy and what it needs to do, because I do think that this COVID-19 thing, I think the mayor's got that on his shoulders, whether he likes it or not. So you got to figure out how to get around that. And so the mailer that I got today, the electronic mailer, still focuses on number of police cars that were produced, or number of police cars that were bought, and number of bonds, obligation bonds that were minimized. And I think that's important, right? I'm not just downplaying that, but it's like essentially avoiding the one thing that is in the room that's affecting everybody, right? So it's awesome that there's new police cars. Like, I understand why we need that. I understand we're a safe city, but that's not like, police cars aren't going to save me from COVID, right? So that's my framework. And I got to figure out how to send a message to people that says, this is the thing that I know that I can handle. And if you can't do that, then it puts, I mean, in my mind, I'm like, that's the missing link. So it is a little bit unusual in that sense. But again, for whatever that's worth, I mean, I said that in the paper, so I'm sure both are going to be super annoyed with me come Sunday. So anyway, so I'm sorry, I didn't realize this, but I didn't realize how far we'd gone over. I actually do myself have to go, but I certainly appreciate it, and it was nice seeing you all. Thanks very much, and thank you for the bow ties. That was really sweet of you all. I appreciate that a lot.
I like
Bye-bye.
it. Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Bye.
See you guys, couple of weeks. Good questions. Bye, Catherine.
Hey,
Is the
hey,
meeting
ring the bell.
adjourned?
We have to adjourn, right?
Yeah, that's when
Otherwise,
I
we're
stop
open until
recording.
3 weeks from now.
That's true.
Bye, guys.
Bye,
Bye,
Bye, happy
Bonnie.
Thanksgiving.
I like seeing your whole face, Bonnie. I miss you. Oh, look at you. I can hear you laughing even though I can't hear you laughing.
Dr. Campos, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Doctora.
Thank you.
See ya. Bye. Bye.